Hey, Shalom Akim, Shalom, Shalom. All praises, glory, and honor to Yahweh, Ba'ashim, Yahweh Shai, Ba'ashim Rakakwadash. Double honors the apostles and the elders, great millstone, for teaching us his truth and citations to the sincere Akim and Akwath and listen. May the blessing of election be upon your house. My name is Brother Okwai. I'm back in here with another quick and Lord's will as always, an edifying lesson. And for today's lesson, I kind of wanted to go through a little bit of history in regards to the origins of Valentine's Day. Also, some of the origins I've noticed, it was also known as a festival called Lupercalia. So I'm just going to do a little bit of reading in regards to what it was, what happened during that time. Of course, it was taking place during that time of the that fourth beast that you read about in Daniel 7, also known as the Roman Empire. And we know we live in a time that is known as essentially spiritual Rome. It's Rome all over again, right? And the ways of Babylon the Great, has taken on the ways and the customs of those ancient kingdoms, especially known as Rome. So, as a matter of fact, before I start reading, let me just get this precept just to kind of break the ice. Just bear with me. Got a lot of tabs open here. Okay. Okay, this is Ecclesiastes chapter 1 verse 9. And it says, "The thing that hath been, it is that which shall be. That which is done is that which shall be done, and there is no new thing under the sun." See, verse 10. "Is there anything whereof it may be said, See, this is new? It hath already been of old time, which is before us." So all these different customs that you see that are partaken, that are being manifest in this society, there have some, essentially they have origins that go back to some place, right? So people think that they, especially our people, they think that, you grow up in this society, especially, and then when they grow up, you get so accustomed to, these different customs. Like, no, these customs have already been before time. And what happens is, over different empires, it gets, essentially, that vibration never changes. It stays the same, but the names change. The names of the gods change. The names of the certain things that are tied to this particular custom, they do change, right? So it's nothing ever new. It just gets, essentially just gets recycled, and the only thing that really changes is the empire, right? So we live in a time where Babylon the Great is ruling, aka America, but it already existed before time, right? So okay, let me go to, so this is on Vindolanda.com. So I'm just going to read a little bit of commentary in regards to this origins of this so-called holiday, right? So it says, "The origin of the name Lupercalia, also known as the Feast of Lupercal, is derived not only from the Roman fertility god Lupercus, but also from the name given to the cave where Romulus and Remus, the founders of Rome, were alleged to have been nurtured by a she-wolf." So it says, "The festival of Lupercalia was in itself a very violent and sexually charged affair that was carried out in two separate locations. Firstly, in the cave, and secondly, in a Roman open-air public meeting place known as a comitium." So it says, at the Lupercal cave, a dog and one of the male goats represent the sexuality sacrificed by the Luperci, a group of priests. That kind of reminds me of the custom of inauguration, actually. because the custom of auguration, that goes back to augury, which was essentially a practice that was done, in Rome as well, right? So when they get the presidents, when they get so-called elected, they go through that process known as inauguration. But that's also another Roman custom practice as well. And a person who would be doing it was known as an augur, which was basically like a soothsayer, right? So that's why, the scriptures say that there's nothing new, right? And all these things have came beforehand and have been done already. There's nothing, spick and span, nothing, there's nothing innovative of what goes on in this society, basically, right? So further on, it says, two of them, speaking of the priests, the Luperci known as, it says two of them at this point naked would be smeared by the blood from a sacrificial knife. As the Luperci priest laughed, the blood was removed with wool soaked in milk. Strips of freshly sacrificed goats were then cut to form what was referred as thongs or februa. It says these were to be used later in celebration. It is likely to be where the name of the month February found its origins. So here it says the festivities were then transferred to the city of ancient Rome. Naked or half naked, the Luperci ran around using the februa or the thongs to whip all women who were striking distance. This was a fertility rite, welcomed by many of the ladies present, who often bare their skin to be lashed. Location was very important. So, for example, it says a lashed breast may lead to lactation. As time progressed, this tradition became more chaste as nudity fell out of favor and women were whipped on the hands by fully clothed men. Right, so essentially they would run around and they would have, they would be whipped by, a so-called priest, right? And it's supposed to invoke a sense of, it's supposed to be like a sexual, there's a sexual charge to it, basically, to essentially, I'm guessing the goal is to, bring forth, children, right? But, a lot of these different festivals, these different pagan festivals, and one of the things I noticed, there's always there's a strong fertility, woman worship, tied to a lot of these different gods, right? And the scriptures say that the as a matter of fact, let me get it. There's two precepts I'm thinking of right now. Okay, I'll get the one in Psalms. Okay, this is Psalms 96, verse 5, and it says, "For all the gods of the nations are idols, but the Lord Yahweh, Bashim Yahushai, made the heavens." Right? So, all these different gods that, these heathens, pay quote-unquote homage to, they're just idols. They're just wood and stone. There is no, there's no power. There's another scripture in Isaiah that says, I am the Lord, to roughly paraphrase, and there is no other gods besides me, right? But these other nations, they all, in some way, shape, or form, you notice that they all have, different, gods for different things. They have a corn god, they have a moon god, they have a sun god, they have a water god, they have a grass god. They have gods for different things, right? But all these gods are idols. As the scriptures say, there's no other gods besides the Lord, Yahweh Bashim Shai, right? So, let me go down. Let me just read a little bit more here. Okay, so it says, lower down, then I'll go to Jeremiah, and it says, "It is not coincidental that the Christian festival of St. Valentine's Day should fall on the 14th February, which is right in the middle of Lupercalia, as is evident in other examples of pagan festivals that were co-opted by Christianity." So here they mention Yule, Saturnalia becoming Christmas, Samhain becoming Halloween, or All Hallows Eve. It says oyster or ostara becoming Easter. It appeared to be easier to the early Christians to simply assimilate local customs and develop a more sanitized, chaste way to celebrate them as a way to gently control the populace, right? But you could put lipstick on a pig; it's still a pig, though. You know, if you go, hold on, let me go to because the customs of these other nations, they don't profit you anything. This is Jeremiah 10 verse 1, and it says, "Hear the word of the Lord speaketh unto you, O house of Israel. Thus saith the Lord Yahweh, learn not the way of the heathen, and be not dismayed at the signs of heaven, for the customs of the heathen are vain. For one cutteth a tree out of the forest, the work of the hands of the workman with an axe. They deck it with gold and silver, and they fasten it with nails, with hammers, that it move not." Right? So, these customs of these different heathens are vain. They're empty. They're shallow. They don't actually lead towards, life. Actually, a lot of these customs lead towards death, right? If it's not something that the Lord has given us, because we have, as Israelites, we have our own customs, but Jake has forgotten their resting place, as the scriptures say, and they don't know. They're just wandering in a wilderness without actually knowing the vibration that comes with these customs. And that's another thing. Also, Jake doesn't have an investigation spirit to actually go into these things and know the origins of where these things go back to. Because we've been dwelling in Babylon for so long, what essentially happens is Jake's mind gets so marinated with, the customs of these different heathens, and there is no separation. So essentially, they kind of just get seduced into doing these different customs. Like, for example, they might, for example, I personally grew up in the islands, and we don't celebrate Halloween. But, a lot of the Israelites that might come from these places, when they come here, then they start to celebrate and partake in Halloween. Oh, it's for the children. My girlfriend's going, so I gotta go do it. And all these different, sorts of, BS excuses, as to, reasons to get into these customs. But they're vain. They don't profit you anything, right? And I want to get that in a quick second. Let me just see if there's a little bit more here. Okay, so just a little bit more. It says, in the 5th century AD, Pope Gelasius I decided to outlaw the practice of Lupercalia and mandated that the February 14th would be the mark of the martyrdom of Saint Valentine instead. Many legends circulate regarding Valentine himself. It says just how much of the celebration of Lupercalia influences the traditions of Saint Valentine's Day can be a little vague, but genuine comparisons can be drawn with the use of colors. It is thought that the red could stem back from the blood sacrifices carried out by the feast of Lupercal. Perhaps the contrasting use of the white could be compared to the milk to cleanse the blood from the anointing Luperci, also known as the priests, to signify new life and procreation. Whatever comparisons could be drawn, it is very apparent that many of our current traditions and practices are still heavily influenced by those of the Roman Empire some 2,000 years ago. It proves that priorities of humanity as a whole have not changed throughout history, right? So that's pretty much the article here. What I can do is I can probably see if I can link this in the description, copy and paste it. But that's pretty much it, So let's go to because I mentioned the being seduced. Okay, let's go to Proverbs, because this is one of the consequences of being around these different, these heathens, right? So this is Proverbs 12, verse 26, and it says, "The righteous is more excellent than his neighbor, but the ways of the wicked seduceth them." And Jake is still the Lord's woman. So Jake, being around these different heathens, their minds get seduced into conforming to these different ways. So say, for example, you have a child, and your child's in a classroom, with a bunch of other heathens, and they're all celebrating Halloween, for example. And then child comes home, and the child doesn't maybe have their full understanding of what's going on, but they see everybody else doing it, so our children get seduced by that. And a lot of the times what happens is, it's mostly our women that really want to partake in these things, right? It's mostly them that really want to push. And it's in another thing also, it's mostly a lot of our women that are in the Catholic Church. You see a lot of men actually leaving, and they're not subscribing to a lot of these different ways, right? So these different ways, these different customs are very, very seductive, because we're not supposed to learn these different ways and these different practices, because what ultimately brings forth from that, the fruit thereof, is pretty much death and destruction, right? So let's go to, I think that's Kings. Since I mentioned the women, this is 1 Kings 11, verse 1, and it says, But King Solomon loved many strange women, together with the daughter of Pharaoh, women of the Moabites, Ammonites, Edomites, Zidonians, and Hittites, of the nations concerning which the Lord Yahweh said unto the children of Israel, You shall not go in unto them, neither shall they come in unto you, for they shall turn away your heart after their gods. Solomon clave to these in love. And he had 700 wives, princesses, and 300 concubines, and his wives turned away his heart. And it came to pass, when Solomon was old, that his wives turned away his heart after other gods, and his heart was not perfect towards the Lord Yahweh Bashem Yahushai, as was the heart of David his father. For Solomon went after Ashtoreth, the goddess of the Zidonians, after Milcom, the abomination of the Ammonites, And Solomon did evil in the sight of the Lord, right? Because we're not supposed to be, following these different ways. Pretty much kind of like how a man wants his woman to only just be focused on him. That's pretty much the same vibration how the Lord wants the Israelite man, because we weren't supposed to be going into the ways and the practices of these other gods, right? Because that's like adultery in a sense, right? We're communing with these other gods and trying to seek their help and go into their customs and their practices. And normally what comes with these customs of these different gods is death. It always does something. It's always something that leads to death. It leads to decay. It leads to destruction. It's a huge disservice to yourself, and Jake doesn't seem to understand that, right? Conforming our ways to the ways that the Lord has instructed us to be, it really is to preserve and keep us alive, right? But like, let's just take, for example, like I believe it's Molech. Hold on. There's a god that deals with child sacrifice. Like, when you think about that, the Lord didn't ask us and require us to do that, right? But when you see that and you see Jacob doing those things, it leads to death and you transgressing against your power, right? And it's not something that the Lord required us to even do. But you see that those customs, they trickle and they're sprinkled about in, for example, in the Hollywood and entertainment industry, and a lot of our people get seduced into doing those things. Another one is is what do you call it? What's that word? Essentially, when the men are like cross-dressing, they put on females apparel. That's a very, very big thing amongst, when that Jake does in, the entertainment industry. You see, they might come up, they might drop a one album, and then a couple years pass by, and you just see the musician, they pop up and they have to wear a dress. Speaking of the Israelite men, it's always something to do essentially with transgressing against your power, right? It's always something to do to make you essentially offend in the eyes of the Lord, right? But you see all the ways of these different gods, it just causes us to like slowly chip away at at some things that we're not supposed to do, right? Okay, let me go back to First Kings. Okay, I'll read verse 6 again, and it says, "And Solomon did evil in the sight of the Lord, and went not fully after the Lord, as David his father. Then did Solomon build an high place for Chemosh, an abomination of Moab, in the hill that is before Jerusalem, and for Molech, the abomination of Ammon. And likewise did he for all his strange wives burnt incense and sacrificed unto their gods. And the Lord was very angry with Solomon, because his heart was turned away from the Lord Yahweh, God of Israel, which had appeared before unto him twice. And he commanded concerning this thing, that ye shall not go after the other gods, but he kept not which the Lord Yahweh hath commanded," right? So what happens is, it causes you to sin, and sin is a transgression of the law, because we're not supposed to have all these other gods, right? We're not supposed to be paying homage to these other gods, right? Paul says this in Corinthians, where he says, "I've espoused you to one husband, that you may be chaste," right? And that chaste, going into pure. We're not supposed to be going into these different ways of these different idols, right? Because it causes us to be corrupt. We're supposed to be a holy one, a separate people, right? And that's what makes us above these other nations, right? So let me see how much time. Okay, let me go to the Apocrypha real quick. Okay, this is Sirach 33, verse 8, and it says, "By knowledge of the Lord they were distinguished, and he altered seasons and feasts, and some of them he made high days and hallowed them, and some of them he had made ordinary days," right? So I'm reading this because, part of, us knowing that we're Israelites is the fact that we have our own feast days, we have our own holy days, we have our own high holy days, right? We have Passover, we had Purim recently, we had what's it called, Feast of Dedication, and a lot of these different high holy days we have are tied to something, within our own history. That's why culture is so important, because it keeps you tied to the ways of our forefathers, and it keeps you within the instructions of the Lord, right? You become a plant that is well cultivated, right? That's where you get the word culture from. But Jake is essentially wandering in the society, and they're poorly cultured, black, that culture is a dimming vibration. That's what the scripture. There's a scripture in Lamentations that says, "How has the gold become dim, and how has that fine gold changed?" To roughly paraphrase, because by going into these different ways, it essentially what it does, it dims Jake's vibration, and then you're calling yourself, black. It doesn't emit any sort of life, right? It just promotes death and destruction and decay. Because when you listen to a lot of the music, just using music as an example, it promotes that hatred and that animosity between you and your own kin, right? It promotes a vibration of Cain, to kill and destroy your own brethren rather than to actually love your own kin, but you essentially, it promotes a vibration where you're always transgressing against your power, right? Let me just go back to Kings here. Okay, this is verse 10, 1 Kings 11, and it said, "And commanded him this thing, that he shall not go after other gods, but he kept not which the Lord commanded. Wherefore the Lord said unto Solomon, For as much as this is done of thee, and thou hast not kept my covenant statutes, I will command thee, I will surely rend the kingdom from thee, and give it to thy servant," right? So essentially Solomon's kingdom got split. Rehoboam, was in charge of the southern kingdom, and then you had Jeroboam, he got the 10 tribes, right? So after that, the kingdom, just got split up, and then we've just been in captivity, ever since, right? So that's pretty much, the point I kind of wanted to hit here. But that's just a little ins and outs of what happens with idol worship. We're not supposed to be worshiping these different idols, these different feast days. Like, they all have some kind of pagan filthy, vibration tied to it, right? So anyways, I'll leave it there, but Lord's will, this was edifying. So I have to give out praises, glory and honor to Yahweh Bashim El Shai. Till next time, I say Shalom.